Atomic batteries to power. Turbines to speed.
Now, Everything Old is New Again, America's entertainment pop culture talk show.
It may well possess a rudimentary intelligence.
I'm trying to think, but nothing happens.
Felt a great disturbance in the force.
Hello, I'm Mr. Red.
Come on, bark like a dog for me.
Where's the goodies? Leave the gun. Take the cannoli.
I bet you wouldn't have done anything like this if Mom and Dad were here.
You filthy criminal.
Excuse me while I whip this out.
Go ahead. Make my day.
Here are your hosts, Douglas Viviani and David Cohen.
Here's to the big dreams, to the hard work. Here's to the team, to the fans. Here's to the big shot.
You ready for the February foolishness here on Everything Old is New Again, trying to determine what is the best board game of all time? We have gone through Sorry and Trouble, Chutes and Ladders, Candyland, Risk, Yahtzee, Trivial Pursuit, Clue, Operation Connect 4, Battleship, Mousetrap, Scrabble, Stratego, Life, Monopoly, Backgammon, Trouble. I think I may have said Trouble already. I'm in trouble saying all that. We have determined, and who's we, by the way? We're here with the champion himself, David Cohen. How are you?
Oh, champion, huh?
I like that.
I'm well. Good to be back.
All right.
Good
We also
to be back and good to have. Yes, go ahead.
Our strategist extraordinaire, Dan Neuburger from Half Hollow Hills High School East, class of, should we say the year? I don't even care. No, class of 80. We're back. Better than ever. Dan, how are you?
Doing great, Doug. Thank you for not saying which century 80 was in.
We are young at heart. We are trying to determine what is the best board game of all time. We do realize that there are new board games, which we will discuss later on in this show, that may make our February foolishness next year. We'll see. But as of right now, now we have.
You can edit that out.
I usually do. The final four is Yahtzee, Trivial Pursuit, Backgammon. And if you were listening that last week, we are just about to find out and figure out what is the fourth team, if you will, or the fourth game that will be in the final four, Stratego or Battleship. Now, I'm going to present my thoughts. Again, just in some, Stratego gave me a lot of excitement as a kid. You have a lot of choices how to prepare your board, so to speak, and how to use your pieces. So it does have, as Dan says, the element of chess, but it also has another element of conquering the world, so to speak. Battleship, I do like Battleship. I think it's fun, and any age can play it. It can easily play it, no problem. Less strategy, I would say, though there is some. So there we have my thoughts. I'm not going to vote just yet. Dan, what are your thoughts? Just briefly, it's a brand new episode here, so if you want to just give us 2 cents on those two before you dive into a vote.
Yeah, this is a battle of the Titans for me.
Here we go.
Because I love both of these games. This is going to be a really difficult one to choose between. I may end up having to go with which one has the better motto, but difficult choice.
And David?
Yeah, I have a soft spot for one, so I think it's just more fun.
All right, so why don't you start us off and tell us what that is and place your vote?
Yeah, for me, it's going to be Battleship. I mean, I think I remember playing Stratego a long time ago. It was very involved, and I don't know. Battleship's just a fun game. There's excitement. There's, the mystery of really not being able to see, what the other player is doing, and I just have good memories from playing it. So that's my pick.
Okay, Dan, where are you?
Yeah, David brings up the issue of memories, and I have lots of very blurred memories about playing Stratego, although I played it quite a bit as a kid. But Battleship, what sticks in my mind is the motto, "You sunk my battleship," and all these years later, I still remember that and getting excited about that game. So I'm with David. I'm going to have to go with Battleship.
Wow, I'm deep into the world of Stratego. I'm not a Battleship fan. I'm going to defer, if you will, or demur, I guess we call it, and at least present my vote for Stratego. It's a 2-1 victory, though, for Battleship in the final four. Wow. These are some surprises here. Very exciting. I never expected Yahtzee, Trivial Pursuit, Battleship, and Backgammon to be the final four, but there it is. And I'll tell you, this is going to be exciting to figure out which of those four are going to be, or is going to be, the best of all time. We're going to get into that in the second round here, but I want to talk about, or let's figure out what they're going. You're going to have Yahtzee against Backgammon. So think about that. Trivial Pursuit against Battleship. Do we have some thoughts? I don't know if I want to dive into. Let's just see. We can. Well, we can. I guess we could do the start the final four now if you like. We've got some time. How about we start with Yahtzee versus Backgammon? Let's at least get some thoughts as to comparing and contrasting these two games. And before you place your vote, where you are on this, Dan.
Well, now you're messing me up because I thought we were doing Yahtzee against Trivial Pursuit. So now I got to rethink what I was going to say. I do find it interesting that of the final four, we have one game that's relatively new in Trivial Pursuit and one game that, as we talked about a couple of weeks ago, is very old in Backgammon.
Right.
So if the choices are between Yahtzee and Backgammon, like both games, I know which one I'm going to go with. Do you want me to tell you now, or do you want to wait?
Not yet. Don't tell us yet. We will do a drum roll, so to speak, but let's hear David Cohen's thoughts, and then I'll dive in with mine.
You know, it is really tough. This is getting tougher as we go along. I don't know. I'm still thinking about it. I'm kind of leaning towards one just because it's a little more complex and a little more interesting. But does that mean it's more fun? I don't know.
I'm going to go with one that I've played much more often, though I think I have a softer spot in my heart for the other. In other words, Yahtzee, as a family game, you don't – the playing field is kind of level with a 10-year-old and a 50-year-old playing, let's say. Backgammon, I think it's still level, but I think there's a little more strategy to it, and you need to do a little more planning. I'm going to place my vote right now. Are you ready?
Well, Doug, can I ask you a question before you give your vote?
Yes.
Are we talking about a really bright 10-year-old and a 70-year-old with dementia, or are we talking about like?
Well, I'll put it this way. It doesn't matter because as far as I'm concerned, Backgammon, everything old is new again, if you will. Backgammon is my winner of Yahtzee versus Backgammon. There's one vote in. Who wants to place the next vote?
Oh, wait, it's Yahtzee versus Backgammon? Oh,
yes.
God. Wait. Okay. Yahtzee okay.
All right, so let's defer to Dan for a second while you kind of get your thoughts together. Yeah. Dan, where are you on this?
Yeah, both fun games to play. I would say that the game that I'm going to go with has great longevity, and there's likely a reason that it has been played for so many years. Plus, you can have a cool carrying case to carry the game around. So I'm going to have to go with Backgammon.
I like it. Good. David Cohen, you certainly are now outvoted.
But you go.
I did already. My vote was Backgammon.
Okay, yeah. Let's make it a clean sweep then. Backgammon.
All right, there we go. All right, so Backgammon is in the finals. Interesting. A game that, what do you remember the date? I think it was it around like 3000 BC? Was that the date of Backgammon? Something like that. Holy smokes.
It's an old game.
We talk about 5,000-year-old game is in our final
There's got to be something to it, right? I mean, think about that. That's really a sick thing to think of. 5,000 years. It's still a popular game. That's insane.
Yeah, that's over the top. I'm really interested in that. That's wow. Out of all the games that have been invented since then, but it hasn't won yet. It's going to go up against either Trivial Pursuit or Battleship now. Those are two monsters of games, if you will, two real behemoths in the modern board game mecca. Let's see what happens when we get back. We'll find out which of those two are in the final, and then we'll have the final. Any final thoughts? We've got 45 seconds here. I don't want to rush the others. So any final thoughts as to where we are? Like what? I'll go this way. I'm very surprised in my world that chess and Stratego didn't go further than they went. Anybody else have any surprises?
I'm not surprised about that.
Well,
Wow.
yeah. I mean, you have to. These were some difficult decisions to choose between the various games. So, yeah, I mean, you can only have 4 in the final 4, obviously.
But there were any surprises for you, Dan?
Yeah, actually, I'm surprised that Trivial Pursuit made it as deep into the brackets as it did. One of the most amazing things to me is that, given the age of backgammon, and when it was invented, the fact that we remember that game, but we don't remember Harvey Rabinowitz, who invented the game.
We'll be back off that thought right after this. Everything Old New Again with the finals of February Foolishness.
You're listening to Everything Old is New Again, America's entertainment pop culture talk show with Douglas Viviani and David Cohen.
Check. Knight takes bishop. King to rook 2. Queen to king 4. Congratulations, sir. A brilliant coup.
I guess another reference to 007 or James Bond. Chess there and From Russia with Love. Interesting how James Bond movies focused on chess and backgammon in 2 of our clips. That's interesting. 2 classic old games. We're talking about board games, trying to determine what is the best board game of all time. We're here with Dan Neuburger, Douglas Viviani, David Cohen. Everything Old is New Again. We're down to trying to figure out who is in the finals with backgammon. Trivial Pursuit up against Battleship. I'm going to say that is going to be an easy one for me, but I'm going to throw that out first to David Cohen. Give me an idea, your thoughts on those 2 up against each other.
Well, Dan was saying before he was surprised that Trivial Pursuit made it to the final 4, but Trivial Pursuit was in a very weak bracket. The Southwest was up against Clue and Operation and Connect 4. So, I think part of it has to do with where it was placed in the bracket. But if you're going to compare, is it Trivial Pursuit and Battleship we're talking about?
Yeah.
I can't. I think it's getting lucky again, Trivial Pursuit, because I guess it's better than Battleship. I'm not thrilled about the decision, but I kind of have to go with Trivial Pursuit.
Dan.
I'm coming at this from a different perspective. By the way, I agree that the Trivial Pursuit bracket was, it's not exactly the Cinderella because it was a very weak bracket being up against games like Operation that I just really didn't love as a kid. But I also subscribe to the notion that if you're not prepared to lose every friend you have over a board game, you're not playing hard enough. Trivial Pursuit doesn't really, for me, it doesn't fall into that same category. Battleship is one of those games that does hold a place in my heart just in terms of my recollections of playing that game as a kid. So I'm going to go with Battleship.
Isn't that interesting? And I'm going to say this. You're going to be controversial. There's a little emotion involved in these decisions, too, is there not? I think that what you just mentioned, both of you talking about the past and so forth, first of all, the bracket was weak. I agree, although Connect 4 I thought would have done better than it did.
Nobody knows what that is, though.
Yeah, everyone plays Connect. You start playing it, it's there. But okay, I get you. Because that bracket there with chess, Risk, and Yahtzee, that was a tough bracket.
That was you might have had a winner out of any of those.
Yeah, that was very true. And also Monopoly Life and Backgammon, that was tough too.
Right.
To be honest. But because Stratego lost to Battleship, and that burns me because I think Stratego is so much better than Battleship, I'm going with Trivial Pursuit. How about that?
I don't feel good.
And by the way, I do enjoy Trivial Pursuit. I'm not voting just because of that. I really did. Back in the day, I loved the Trivial Pursuit. I was great at it. We all probably were great at it on this panel, I would suggest, and really enjoyed playing it. So that's where I'm at on that. So I guess we could say that we now know who are in the finals for the best board game of all time. A relatively new and probably the newest game on our board Trivial Pursuit, right?
Yeah, it's only 40 years old or something.
Yeah, against the oldest game on our board, backgammon. Think about that.
That's kind of cool.
These games are 5,000 years apart from the invention of each other.
We did a great job, guys, actually, I think.
That's very interesting. I think that's really interesting. So now we've got to battle and roll our sleeves up a little bit here because we've got 5-6 minutes to fill here. 7 minutes.
I'm thinking maybe this was really destined. We were destined to come to this final two. The old versus new, right, Doug? It's just perfect.
And I think it's very interesting theme-wise, and there's no plan, but everything old is new again. I'm not being facetious. For a game like backgammon to be that popular these days, and again, be that old, I mean, and then again, if you're really in a microcosm in a smaller way, Trivial Pursuit is an older game from our lifetime, and that's new again because I think I see it more on television now being advertised. I don't know if it's coming back or not, but they're pushing some advertising on it. So both of these really fall into the theme of everything old is new again. Does that make sense, Dan?
I love this. I mean, I had no idea how this was going to play out. But I really like the fact that the oldest game on this sheet that we started out with is now up against the most recent game. And, if you think about it, backgammon was in a very difficult bracket, as you mentioned. There's games like Monopoly, but backgammon has had great staying power. Whereas even a game like Monopoly, you can tell that Monopoly is an old game because there's a luxury tax and rich people can go to jail. Backgammon is not like, it's still relevant today. I mean, think about that. 5,000 years ago, this game was invented, and we're still saying it's one of our favorite games. I just find that really cool.
It's still revered in some way, too. And I know this sounds silly, but in our pop culture, for it to make an appearance in a movie in 1983, a James Bond series, Octopussy, that was very popular, in our culture, and to have a whole scene devoted to it, and how classy it is, and people betting on it, and gentlemen that are, in our world, we'll translate it to billionaires or multimillionaires back then, betting on playing backgammon. I mean, it's not a joke. Like it was taken seriously in that movie too, if that makes sense. So I get a kick out of that. So, all right. So now the question then is, how do you determine? What are you going to use? What's your criteria? Just an idea. David, what's your criteria in an idea? So these two, what are you looking for the best game of all time? Are you looking what are you looking for? Satisfaction of thought process, of luck, of strategy, or a combination of all of those? What's your game? What's your kind of game? Not the winner yet, but what kind of a game do you like to play?
Yeah, they're two very different kinds of games. Very different from each other. So it's hard. And I have to admit, I don't feel good about either one of them winning this whole thing for some reason. I really don't. I'm getting a little nauseated. I'm a little lightheaded right now. I might have to go off the air for a minute.
Why do you dislike them, or you just don't feel that they should be revered as the best of all time?
I mean, I think it's really cool that they're the final two, like we were just talking about, but I don't feel good about one of these winning at all.
So let me ask you this. Take a look at all of them on the board, forgetting the Final Fours, all that stuff. Yeah. If you were to pick any of these 18 games that we have here, which would be the one that you would say is the best of all time, forgetting the Final Four?
Yeah, I know. Well, there's some games that I think I should say because they're classics, and others I think that I shouldn't say just because they're fun.
Well, let's go this way. Personally, for you, you're not voting for the world, so to speak now. Just personally to you, which is your favorite game of this pile?
You guys are going to laugh at me, but, I'm coming back to Monopoly for some reason. I don't know why. Because it's like, I think when you play Monopoly with people, just the worst comes out. In everyone, right? And any like family dynamics that are like just under the surface really start coming out. And it's an ugly game. and it's messy and it takes too long. But for some reason,
and isn't that what a board game is all about? Bringing out the worst in people and taking a long time to do
it. I don't know why I'm coming to Monopoly, but and I can't say I've ever had fun playing it. It's just my neuroses. All right, but I'm going to answer your question. I think the most fun I've had playing a game, I would have to say, is probably Battleship. Is that crazy?
Yeah,
not crazy at all.
Yeah.
Well, Dan, what do you go for when you talk about a game? Which do you look for? What's your what are you looking for in a game? Fun, strategy, chance. What's your thoughts?
Well, fun is overrated. Who wants to play a game for fun? I mean, obviously it has to be a fun game, but I like games that have some skill and strategy in addition to like a little bit of luck and chance thrown in for good measure. I think I would give you a different answer for the best game versus my favorite game. Like if I was to say the best game, Monopoly would be towards the top of my list, but it would not be my favorite game for the reasons that we've been discussing over the last few episodes. I would actually choose Battleship as my favorite game.
Wow. Okay. There's nothing wrong with that. I get it. Yeah. You're going to think I'm crazy. Stratego is my favorite game of all of these. So, I guess it is certainly a personal decision, that's for sure, personally. But then I think there's a different lens you're looking at it when you say, what is the best game of all time? That backs you up from your own perspective, I think. And don't you think it changes it a little bit where you say, well, I'm not just voting for myself. I'm voting for, overall, what is the best game? I don't know if that changes. It kind of changes things a little bit, doesn't it, Dave?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right. It's like, it's voting with your head over your heart, that sort of thing.
Right.
Right.
And Dan?
It's also, I think that there's a lot of nostalgia that gets brought up when you start asking yourself a question like, what's my favorite game, right? I mean, the Trivial Pursuit, I think we were, when that came out, even though it was a while ago, we were at a different stage in our lives. We didn't play that as young kids. And I remember, when I was younger, I would say we had more family-friendly board games with questions like, who murdered this guy with a pipe? And that, the games have changed over the years so much. And it's interesting because I know we're going to talk in a minute about the championship round here of the brackets. And the comment that I would make is that I think one of these games has the potential to make people feel bad about themselves, that people can be intimidated playing the game, whereas the other one is just about the game and the fun aspect. And so that is going to influence my vote.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll find out where the votes lie and which is the best board game of all time. February Foolishness coming to a close very soon here on Everything Old's New Again.
Spin the spinner and call the shop. Twister ties you up in a knot. That's Twister. Yeah, Twister.
Welcome back to Everything Old is New Again. Douglas Viviani here with David Cohen and our special guest, Dan Neuburger. Dan, you having a good time?
Having an awesome time. It's great to hear from you guys again.
Absolutely. It's always good to revisit. When were you last here? Was it got to be about 4 years ago, huh? Talking about toys?
Yeah, I don't know if it was that long, but it was quite a while ago.
Definitely before the pandemic. So let's go let's say 3 years ago, let's say, in that range. Wow. Time flies, man. Goes fast. Holy smokes. Speaking of which, we have just flown through 18 board games, and we are down to the final two, the final game right now in February Foolishness on Everything Old is New Again, trying to figure out what is the best board game of all time. Holy smokes. Will we be able to do it? Will you agree with us? Are you already angry with us? David Cohen, are you ready for this final game? Are you?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
Dan's making notes. Dan's got all kinds. He's taking this extraordinarily seriously, and I really like that because I do too. It's just something that this is some good, clean fun, put it that way, that you don't hear on the radio, and I think will generate some thoughts and interest where people may go ahead and actually have a conversation about this after they hear what our result is. And let's start. Backgammon against Trivial Pursuit. As we've said, backgammon is a game that's a game for the ages. It's been around for 5,000 years. It's something that involves certainly luck, because it's a roll of the dice, and that is nothing more than luck. However, you do have some strategies to how you're going to line up your pieces, where you're going to go. Do you take a chance and just put one piece on a board and maybe get jumped on and have to go back to the beginning, or not? And how do you protect against that kind of thing? So it's got some strategy to it as well. Trivial Pursuit is the negative to Trivial Pursuit, I would say, and it's positive at the same time for some people, is that you have to have experience. Like someone that's 18 playing someone that's 50 is going to have a disadvantage unless they have a lot of time watching AMC or old movies or Turner Broadcasting, whatever. Yes, David.
Unless, and this is I think one of the advantages of Trivial Pursuit is you buy a version of Trivial Pursuit in the subject matter that maybe you and your friends or your family all know a lot about. See, that would make it more competitive.
See, that's a great point. Like Dan said previously, I know, I'm not familiar with it, but there's a Disney version. I bet you there's a Star Wars version. And so forth, or at least science fiction or whatever. You're right. I haven't rolled my sleeves up and seen the new versions of Trivial Pursuit that exist, but that's a great point. There probably are. And if you did a Disney, now I'm an experienced person. In other words, I've lived on the planet for a while, but I probably would not be good at the Disney version when my kids were probably really good at it. So that might be an equalizing factor. Dan?
Yeah, 100%. So we actually have the Disney version, and it was great because we couldn't play Trivial Pursuit with our kids because they didn't know any of the answers. But when we played the Disney version, we all knew a lot of the answers. So it was fun because the kids could actually participate. And that actually, again, will play into my reasoning for which of these two games I'm going to choose. By the way, let me just say, I love board games. I always have loved board games, but it's not just about the game itself. I think there's something about sitting around a table across from people, and it's all the BSing that happens in between turns that is what makes these games, to me, it makes the memories of these games so pleasant because it's time spent with people that, it's so different these days, not to go down that rabbit hole. But to me, that's what is so awesome about board games, is that people are actually getting together and talking and laughing and just, being foolish with one another. And that's why I, personally love playing board games.
And that's an amazing point. That's what I try to foster at the house. And sometimes you can't, sometimes you can. Dig them away from that stinking telephone and looking at the Facebook and whatever the heck they're looking at. What? Okay. Well, what do you think? What?
You mean cell phone, video screen?
Well, what did I say?
You said telephone.
Right. It's the same. Telephone. What else?
No, it's not the same.
Doug is still using the old princess phone for
exactly.
My phone's in a box. I don't know what you guys are talking about, but remember that first one? Phone in a bag. There you go. That's
the princess phone.
I had a Motorola StarTAC flip phone that you had to literally pull the antenna out of the top. It is a totally different dynamic when you're playing a board game with people versus when you're playing a game on a screen, whether it's your computer screen or your cell phone, Doug, a telephone. I mean, like, you can play a lot of the games that we talked about on your computer screen against the computer, but it's not the same. Like, a computer once beat me at chess, but it was no match for me at kickboxing. It's a totally different dynamic when you're sitting across the table from somebody.
I agree, and I'm on board with that. So that does come into play as well, and that's I think board games are still thriving, and we'll go through this in section 4, the last section of our show here, where there are some new board games that are doing very well with a certain segment. I don't know that everybody does it, but I think once you play a board game, you're going to dive in and you're going to enjoy it. You're going to want to play it again and again. I think it's just something that you need to, you got to get in the waters. You got to put your toe in the water. So speaking of that, what is the best board game of all time? Backgammon, Trivial Pursuit. Who wants to go first? No one does.
Yeah, I'll start us off.
All right,
so this is a very personal choice, and I suspect that all of your listeners are likely sitting there thinking about games that should have been on this list because it's their favorite. How could they have forgotten about, fill in the blank? And they'll probably have a different choice than no matter what of these two games we end up choosing. But I think based on a couple of things. First of all, the longevity. I'm impressed that backgammon has made it to our top 2 list just by virtue of how long people have been playing that game. I think the ability to play is also something that has to be considered, meaning like we were talking a few moments ago about how our kids really couldn't play Trivial Pursuit because how would they know about, what was going on in the 1960s or 70s? And I do think, as I've mentioned before, that game can have a tendency sometimes to make people feel bad about themselves, which is not exactly the purpose of a game. So to me, and I'm surprised that I'm going to give you this answer because I would not have thought going in that this would have been my top choice for games. But if it's a choice between Trivial Pursuit and backgammon, the old man wins here. I go with backgammon.
How about that? Holy smokes. David
All right,
Cohen.
we've got one vote in.
One vote in. David Cohen, where are you on this?
You can argue that Trivial Pursuit is not really a board game because I know there's a board and I know there's pieces, but it's really just about, for the most part, who guesses the right answers, right? It's like going into a bar and trivia night and playing a trivia game that way. But, I'll let that go for a minute. But I think that, one of the big factors I've been talking about is like the hurdle of knowledge that you need to play the game, like prior to. And I think that has a lot to do with it. So for that reason, I agree with Dan, and I can't believe I'm saying it either, but backgammon.
Wow, how about that? And I'm going to demur, and I'm going to say that Trivial Pursuit, clearly and by far,
well, it's obviously your favorite game. That's all you've been talking about, all of these shows. About how you love
last
Trivial
8
Pursuit.
years.
It's not a surprise.
and I would not have voted this way had I not realized and been told, and I enjoy the fact that there are many other versions of the card packs that you can get to equal the field so that you can play Disney or Star Wars or whatever the heck it might be. Music, I'm sure they have for that. I'm sure they have it down by decades and all that. And we're not always talking about playing with people that are, children as well. We do play these games with our contemporaries, as Dan is saying as well. I mean, you're saying both things, but the idea is you do play with your contemporaries as well. So I don't mind making my contemporaries feel like they're fools. No, I'm kidding. The idea, it is kind of a fun thing because I think with Trivial Pursuit, all of us don't know all the answers. So, I don't think I would be ever nasty, but I would say I know that one, but then I could certainly be put into the corner and miss another one that someone else gets and they get a thrill out of that in some way. So I understand your point of view. I get it. But I don't like games of chance. How about that? So I'm going with Trivial Pursuit. But regardless, our winner is backgammon that stood the test of time of 5,000 years and is Everything Old is New Again's fantastic, unbelievable board game of you can't even say century, of all time. It is the best board game of all time. That's what we come to. We'll be back right at this. Everything Old is New Again, and continue discussing board games and follow up with some after game recap. We right here.
Isn't it fun watching them cut down the nets? It's great. It's my favorite part of this.
This is Jim Leitwitz, former two-time World Series champion New York Yankee, and you're listening to Everything Old is New Again with Douglas Viviani and David Cohen.
Hi, this is Rod Carew, and you're listening to Everything Old is New Again.
Hi, this is Marion Redding, and you're listening to Everything Old is New Again.
Hi there, this is Earl Monroe. You're listening to Everything Old is New Again.
There we go. A bunch of champions that have been on Everything Old is New Again. They're all coming aboard to celebrate the new old champion, if you will, of board games, backgammon. The February Foolishness is over. The fanfare has just begun. question is, let's go with David first. I know that you have certain thoughts about the victory that backgammon has presented here on the February Foolishness. Where do you stand? Do you feel that it's been shorted in some way? Do you think some other game has been shorted? It's a fair presentation. Where are we on this?
Yeah, I think it's fair. And I think that, yeah, maybe some of the brackets could have been rearranged differently, or there are probably some games that we weren't thinking about that might have been in there. But, it does stand the test of time. And it's like we said before, I don't know if it's my favorite game, but I think that as far as like real pure board games go, it's not undeserved, the victory. I'll leave it at that.
All right, Dan.
Well, in defense of Yahtzee, I want to say that I think the election was rigged. No, I'm not shocked. I mean, it's a game. It's a great game to play, and it's been around for a long time. There are a lot of really good games, that many of which we've discussed today, and the prior episodes. But any one of these games. Well, I shouldn't say any one of them, because some of them I didn't like Hungry Hippo, but. Yeah, I mean it's a great game, so I'm not shocked.
All right, and I'm not shocked either, but I'm a little surprised, because it's in reflection, it is, and maybe that's what the beauty of it is. It is a simple game. It has strategy and it has chance, but it's also simple. You can kind of pick it up, and I think there's an attraction to that as well, where it's not so detailed and you need to do something like, oh my goodness, it's going to take me a half hour to figure out how to even play this game. So, and I always remember, I mean, in college, I remember being at the Rat, and there was an afternoon or Friday afternoon, there was a backgammon tournament, and many of my buddies and I went down there and participated in a backgammon tournament at 19 years old. So it's timeless in some way. I mean, we got a kick out of it back then. We still play it now. And of course it's been around for 5,000 years. So there's something to it. We'll go that way with it.
So Doug, and David, same question for you. I'm curious to know, of all the games that we have spoken about, what of those games was the most recent one that you played, and how long ago was it? Because as I think about it, there are a lot of other games now that I play, and none of those ones are on my list.
And that's what I want to dive into. I played a Catopoly with Leo and Angelica last weekend, so it's a form of Monopoly. David?
Probably the last one I played was Scrabble. Yeah.
Oh, we've played Scrabble recently too as well. That's a good one. What we have played is, I'm going to throw some out there, and I'm not going to even get into the details of them right now, but let me throw some new ones that I've seen that we've played some of these. Exploding Kittens, Poetry for Neanderthals, Trekking the World, Do You Really Know Your Family, Tacos versus Burritos, Throw a Burrito, and Ticket to Ride. Any of those ring a bell to anyone? Dan?
Not me.
Not a single one. There are a couple of games that I would throw out there, but I think they're probably more, I'll call them adult games, not adult.
Well, let's hear them. Let's see what's going on.
Well, so Cards Against Humanity, I think, is a riot. It's sort of a combination of, remember Mad Libs? It's sort of like Mad Libs meets charades. And there are expansion packs. It's not a board game, but it's cards. Absolutely hilarious game. We've played it with our kids, which has made for some uncomfortable conversations, but there's always a lot of laughing. I mentioned, I think 2 episodes ago, the game Salad Bowl, which is really easy. You don't need to buy anything. It's just strips of paper, and everybody writes down 10 pronouns on a piece of paper. You throw it all into a bowl, and then you sort of pair off into 2 teams. You could play with a lot of people. It's actually more fun when you have a lot of people. So it's great, like a party game. And in the first round, what you do is everybody, individually, one at a time. You have a 1-minute round. It's timed. You pick a sheet of paper out, and you have to, in the first round, give clues about the word. So as an example, one of the words that I put in was Richard Pryor. So I said, comedian, Silver Streak, Gene Wilder. And somebody goes, Richard Pryor. Yep. Okay, we get that point. And I pick another one out of the hat. You go around. After your minute, it moves to the next team. And then after a minute, it goes to somebody else on your team until everybody has a turn. And you keep going until all the sheets of paper are gone. You add up all your points. Second round, you do the same thing with the same words in the hat. but this time you have to act out the word. So you can imagine Richard Pryor becomes a more difficult one to act out. But people in your team, they're remembering what the words were in the first round. And you do the same thing. In the third round, you're only allowed to give a one-word description. So with Richard Pryor, you might say,
like comedian or something.
Yeah, comedian or freebase, whatever it may be. Right. That's going to make you think of. And if your team can't get it, you throw that one back in the hat, and then you pull another one out and you try again. You only have 1 minute. Really, really fun game. And again, you don't have to buy a board. You don't have to order it on Amazon or anything. And then the last one I would tell you about is a game that we played. I only played it one time. We played it with our kids. It was a lot of fun, called Telestrations. And basically, it's sort of like charades, or actually it's more like Pictionary, where you write out a word and then you hand your card to the person on your left, and they, on the next sheet of paper, have to draw a picture of it. You then hand it to the next person and they have to guess what that word is. It's a very, very fun game as well, and it's like a $5 game that you can buy online. But those are three games that we've played fairly recently and are really a lot of fun.
Nice. David, any you put in your 2 cents?
No, I mean, I've played games much more recent than the ones we just all talked about in the Sweet 16. But I none come to mind. There was one that was really popular for a while, like I want to say 15, 20 years ago. I don't remember the name, but it was all different pieces of your mind. Like one was you had to sculpt with clay, and another one you had to like act it out. Another one you had to draw on paper. But I can't remember the name, but it was really fun to play, and you could play with as many and as few people as you want. You know me. It's all about what we forgot to mention in what we just did, all the negative aspects of anything that we do.
Yes.
That you can count on me for that. So if you want to get into that, I'm happy to do it, but I'll leave it up to you, Doug.
Well, let me just go one, see if they have the time. Let me just go one way. I'd suggest two. One, poetry for Neanderthals. You have cards, you have a name or something you're going to try to describe. You can only use one symbol words, because you're a Neanderthal. If you use more than one symbol, there's a blow-up bat. You get hit by the bat, you lose your turn. So it's a great game for the family. And it's interesting, you've got to use one word. Ticket to Ride is really a popular game now with a lot of people, and it's a lots of different versions. And some you take a train to different parts of either the country or Europe or wherever it might be, and you land on cards and you learn about the area that you've landed on, and then you have to do things with that to win the game, with a little bit of a memory game as well as to what is in this area and so forth. So that's a very cool one as well. So that's just my 2 cents. We do have a few minutes. Dave, mention a couple.
Cranium.
Go ahead.
Cranium is the game I was trying to think
Okay,
of.
good. Cranium. Dave, mention a couple. Let's go this way. We only have like 2 minutes left. So Dan, let's talk about the experience. I'm so sorry, but let's just talk about, we only have Dan for a few minutes here.
No, of course.
Let's talk about your experience here on the show and tell us, a little bit about how we did, because you are the board maven and toy man for sure, that we will our go-to guy. So how did we make out, and what do you think of the experience?
I think this was great fun. I mean, it was sort of, I love the name, February Foolishness, because it really is kind of a silly thing to be bracketing board games that we played with as kids and try to figure out which one was the best one. But I love hanging out with you guys. I love just, BSing with you and having a few laughs. I hope that your audience enjoyed the conversation, and, maybe they'll have an opportunity to share with you guys what their thoughts were about board games. But I will say this. I think board games can bring out a lot about our individual characters, who we are. You learn a lot about people when you do sit across the table from them and play these types of games. So it's always great fun to see you guys and to hang out. So I appreciate your inviting me along for the ride.
You're always welcome back. And I would suggest this is just going to be pie in the sky. Maybe we can do this where we try some of these games that have been mentioned that we didn't participate in, in the February Foolishness. And maybe, let's call it a year from now, revisit and just off the cuff instead of all, tied up with the clips and everything else. Now we can talk. Let's just talk about games in general or experience that you've had over the last year with some of these new games. Maybe we can explore the new games in more detail so we can catch up to speed now and see what you and David and I might suggest to play. So let's try to, you do it anyway, but I'm going to try to devote my time to a little bit more board games and see if we can develop some kind of a camaraderie next year, maybe around this time. How's that sound?
I'm always happy to chat with you guys about whatever it is that you want to discuss, whether it's board games or anything else. I'm always happy to join you.
Sounds good. David, any closing
Dan,
thoughts?
All I can say is it's always a better show when Dan is on with us. So thank you, Dan, for your contribution. Always great talking with you.
And off the scene, so to speak, there are comments that come every so often from Dan about the various shows that we do and the stories and whatever else we're doing. And so it's always great to get feedback and to see that we're putting a smile on someone's face anyway. and we're so happy to have you back. We'll definitely do this again. And you listening, how about you do this again next week? Come on back and we'll continue all the fun, thrills, and adventure of everything old is new again. Thank you, Dan.